probably you ever heard many companies, many government, many people talking about that, because our time, it's going fast in terms of how the temperature is increasing, how many heat waves we have been having in the past few weeks, in the past few years, and this brings many problems, brings drought, brings floods, brings hurricanes. We are seeing in US, in Brazil, here, in many places happening, and we have to think about it. Here it's let me ask you one thing first, while they fix this thing here. How many of you are producers? Could you please raise the hand? All of you are from Colombia or no? Who is from Colombia? Okay, we have different countries. And how has been for you in terms of the climate? How have you been seeing? Because this is a photo of Brazil this year. As you know, in Brazil, the system that we grow coffee is under the full sun. We don't have, I would say we don't have, because there are some producers that they have, but the most of the areas, they are grown at full sun. We don't have trees that protect the coffee trees. So this is a very recently photo from one crop. Because of the drought, the leaves were falling. It was very intense. We had some leaves that we could take in the hand and they were like paper because they were getting dry. So this is one big challenge that we have been facing, because we are the biggest producer in the world in terms of coffee, and most of the areas are like that, are grown at the full sun. We don't have protection. And to change the way that we grow coffee, for the way that you grow coffee, we have many things involved. First is that's the way that they have been doing for the whole life. Their grandparents, their parents, and so on. It's a cultural thing. Two is that our varieties, they were created to be at the full sun. So we have to understand how to do a transition to a better system. But we need information. We need to understand what are the impacts and what we can do as producers to avoid that. Because if you keep doing the same thing that we have been doing for years, probably we will not have coffee in the near future. So it was really sad. Now the rains are coming, we are having rains, but the effects on the plant, the plant is not like, it's just like us. If you don't eat well for a long period, we will feel the effects in our body. And the plant is just like the same. If they pass through a long period of stress, we will get to a point that we will have problems in the following years. So we need to change our mindset, and we need to change our reality to avoid those kind of problems. So here is a question: why measure a farm's carbon footprint? Who here measure its own farm carbon footprint? Who does the measurement here? Someone? No? You do? Have you ever heard about carbon footprint? Yes? See? This is a very good question. We as cooperative, we have a few whys. One is that we need to understand how our farm is behaving in terms of this climate change. What is our role in all this? We are contributing to get the problem worse. We are contributing to solve the problem. How we are acting. I think the first thing is the information. Because I was talking with a guy here in the event. and he was like, oh, it's cool that you are measuring your carbon footprint, because I was talking with a producer in Brazil, and he told me that his farm was carbon negative. But the guy is not measuring anything. So we cannot say anything if you don't have the numbers, if you are not measuring, if you don't know for sure. It's still the carbon footprint, the carbon market. It's a little bit complex, but it's a topic that is coming every day more strong. One is to understand, and two, that we as an exporter company, our customers are requesting, not all of them, but some countries, especially in Europe. We were talking here yesterday about UDR, and UDR is just the top of the iceberg. Europe is requesting more and more and more things towards sustainability, towards environment, and it's not only that, social as well. So we as producers, of course, that people, they ask so many things from us, we need to save the planet as a part of the world. But in the coffee market, unfortunately, we have all of those things. And to measure the farm carbon footprint, it helps us to have this understanding where we are as farm. So here is just a graphic that brings, this is regarding the emissions of the whole sectors in the world. And we can see here that around 18% of the total emissions in the planet, they are related with agriculture. You can think that the way that you grow coffee, of course, it's very different from Brazil. It's a manual work with a lot of forests surrounding, but still we have a certain level of impact, being through fertilizer, being through using any kind of machines, the cars. So we have our level of contribution in terms of the emissions of the planet. So this brings for us that even that we are 20% of the total emissions of the world, we need to think differently what we can do differently. So here it's a very short representation of a farm. Can I stay here? A very short representation of how the farm behaves. And so here we have the coffee plants, we have trees, we have the soil, and we have our activities. So in terms of the soil, if you have a well-treated soil, we had several lectures here about all of this, agroforest, biochar, composting. So when we have a good and well-treated soil, the soil is one of the biggest sink of greenhouse gases. So if you have a well-treated soil, they have the power to absorb those emissions. So the soil, it's a live organism. They breathe like the plants, like ourselves. So they have this process to absorb the CO2 and to release the oxygen. So it's important that we have a live soil, a fertile soil, well treated, because they matter into the system of the farm. And I'm saying that, again, in Brazil, the reality is different. So we have many producers that they cover the lines between coffee, but sometimes only with grass. So it's good, but it's not good enough. We need to improve our system thinking about that. And we have the trees, like here you have a lot of trees, and also the coffee plants, they have a big role in all of that, because coffee plants, they are perennial plants. They are there for 10, 15, 20, 50 years. So they have a very important and playing this whole thing, because the plants, they are breathing, so they are also absorbing CO2 and releasing oxygen. So they are big players in the terms of the greenhouse gases. And when we are applying fertilizers, or using agrochemicals. And fertilizers, I mean chemical fertilizers. There is the release of nitrogen, oxide nitrogen to the atmosphere and contributes to those emissions. So here is one point that we have been seeing here through the lectures of improvement, what we can do differently. And also in Brazil, as you know, the most of the activities are mechanized. So the mechanization, the fuel combustion is also one big factor to the emissions. So here is just to have like an understanding of the farm, how it works. And we have been measuring, as I told you, for 4 years now. What we decided to do, we decided to take 2 different farms, one small farm with 12 hectares of coffee. For Brazil, it's small. And one farm, a big farm with 900 hectares of coffee. So 2 completely different kind of operations. Both are mechanized, but very different, because the reality of both producers are different. And why we decided to do that? Because all of us, I think that we have the understanding that the system of a coffee production, we are removing more than we are emitting. But we need to know for sure, because the reality here is different from Brazil, is different from Honduras, and so on. And we need to understand how it is the behavior of this topic in our reality. So we chose these 2 farms. One is a member and the other one is a partner. It's a small grower that we work with. And we hired a company, 2 companies actually, to do 2 different studies. One, whole activities in the farm. So the big farm, they have coffee, of course. They have pork, they have cattle, they have corn, they have several other activities. And the small one, he only produces coffee. So we did the measurement of the whole activities that the farm has and only coffee production. Again, to understand the both situations. Because when you have a farm, I think that it's nice to have this understanding about what is your impact of all the activities. And as we work with coffee, what is the impact of coffee in the equation? So the methodology is unique in everywhere in the world. It's based in the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change from United Nations. And we have the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which they adapt all the data from the IPCC to realities of different sectors. And all of these are for emissions. When we talk about absorption, which is the sequestration of these gases, it is still a blurry space, because in the United Nations, they don't have numbers or reference or coefficients for those sequestrations, but we have several of scientific articles that bring us this understanding. And specifically coffee in agriculture, we have so many products, and coffee is one of them. So it's very specific. So these companies that we have been working, they have been working closely with universities to have this understanding and to help us to get into this balance. Because if you talk with different markets, for an example, one question here, who exports coffee here? Through a partner or directly? Don't need to be directly, but with a partner. We have several markets, and each market, they request different things. One example is in Japan, if you talk about sequestration, for them, they don't care. Why? Because the government only recognizes the emissions because of United Nations. So we know that we have coffee, we know that the plant is there for years absorbing the emissions, we know that we have a good system, but for them, this is not a thing, you know? For them, we need to take actions to reduce so we can have a coffee carbon neutral, carbon zero, or whatever the terms that suits better. But now, who exports to Denmark, for an example? the government, they created a law that every product that they import in their country, they need to prove that that product it's a carbon neutral product, that they are not contributing to get our situation as planet worse. So this is a thing that we still have to understand because each market is different. Of course that we do to have our own understanding, but we have partners across the world and we need to understand how to connect and how to contribute with them as well. So here is the results. It's small, but I will explain to you. This was the balance of the farm operations. Here is the bigger farm, 900 hectares of coffee, and here the small farm, 12 hectares of coffee. And here we included all the activities that they had inside the farm. For the big one, the main factors of emission was animal production, of course, because of the manner of the animals. They release some gases to the atmosphere that contributes to the situation. And the soil correction with fertilizers, limestone, all those products that we use, they release gases to the atmosphere and contribute to that. So here, animal production, here the energy that they use in the farm, fertilizers, and fuel combustion. But at the same time, when we consider in the system of the farm, we have the coffee plants that are absorbing those emissions. We have isolated trees, like randomically trees that we have in the farm. We have native forests. In Brazil, by law, the producer, they must protect 20% of their total area of land. So if they don't have it, they have to plant it somewhere else because it's law, they need to be in compliance. And some planted forests as eucalyptus, mahogany, or other trees that they have at the farm. And when we do the balance of the emissions with the removals, we have a balance that the farm is carbon negative, which means that they are absorbing more than they are emitting. And a fact here that the energy is so low because they have a biodigester system at the farm that generate renewable energy. So it's one important thing as well, that they have this way to use energy that's considerable sustainable. And in the small one, the main emissions are related with the fertilizers and fuel combustion. And here they have the native forests, the coffees, and isolated trees, and also bring us the results that the farm, they are removing more than they are emitting. And we did only for coffee production, focus only in coffee. And when we talk about coffee, we put all the activities that they use at the farm. So for the bigger one, we have the main emissions are related with fertilizers. The most of the producers in Brazil, they use chemical fertilizers. And one thing that is not that good when do the calculation is they don't consider the different types of fertilizers that you use as producers. Because we have some fertilizers that they have a kind of protection to not release the nitrogen to the atmosphere, or they have different systems that helps to reduce this emission. But unfortunately, for the system that measures for the IPCC, they only consider one factor, chemical fertilizers. So we see that the fertilizers are the main one, followed by limestone and fuel combustion. Both farms, they do everything mechanized. All the applications of fertilizers, agrochemicals, harvest, everything is mechanized. So fuel combustion plays a big role also here. And in terms of the removal, as we are only focused in coffee, we only consider the coffee plants and the soil. So as much as healthy and sustainable we have the soils, the biggest will be the absorption of these gases. And for the small ones, same thing. Main emissions regarding the fertilizers, the limestone, the correctives for soil, and fuel combustion. And in terms of the absorption, same thing, soil and coffee plants. Even focus only in coffee production, both farms, they were carbon negative in the final balance. So here we can say that the coffee is carbon negative, and in the previous one that the farm is carbon negative. But why do that? As I told you in the beginning, I think this is a really important thing for us to understand what we could do differently in our farm. If you want to reduce and to contribute to a better climate, we need to think differently. And we need to, first thing is to identify how we are and the next steps. So the main outcomes that we came from these studies, from this balance, it was that we need to have sustainable agriculture practices. We need to improve the way that we grow coffee. I heard a few years ago that here in Colombia, some producers, because when we think about Brazil, we say, oh, they produce a lot under the full sun. The production is very high. When we talk with a producer that is focused in commodity, of course, they can produce even 100 bags per hectare, which is crazy, it's a lot. But they take the plants to the extreme. It's very different. So I heard that there were some producers in Colombia cutting trees to have coffee production at the full sun. But there, the varieties, they were created to that reality. We need to understand first before have a bold move. Because the reality here, the ecosystem here, the microclimate here is not the same in Brazil, is not the same in Honduras, is not the same in Guatemala. All of them are different. We are in Latin America, but all of them are different. So we need to have this understanding. And from the outcomes is basically what we saw here during the lectures. Maybe you were already doing that, but for us in Brazil, this is a very big change of culture, because none of these are the usual for us. So one action is the composting. We have been seeing who went to the tour. They have been using biochar and composting here in the farm, using the residues that we have in the farm, coffee husk or coffee leaves. When you stump the coffee, you have the trunk. We have many things in the farm that we can incorporate to the compost manure of animals. And when we change the chemical fertilizer for the composting, we are reducing drastically the level of emission of greenhouse gases. Remember that I showed to you here that fertilizers are the biggest action that we do as growers that contribute to those emissions. So when we change for composting, for biochar, or for more healthy ways to fertilize our soils, we are contributing to this reduction. And also the use of cover crops. The guy that was here before, he was talking about the system. The idea is to have a more diverse environment, because when we have that, we have a healthy soil, we have a healthy system and balanced ecosystem, because what we want is to have this balanced ecosystem to reduce, to avoid those emissions. So when we do this area here, it was planted 2 years ago, and here is our organic area that they are using cover crops in between the coffee lines. And there are some trees planted also in the middle of the coffee. And the idea to have these cover crops, of course, to protect the soil. When we have an exposed soil, we don't have life there. We kill all the microorganisms that's there. So they bring this life, more microorganisms to the soil. And these cover crops here, they were chosen to fixate nitrogen to the soil. So it contributes also to reduce the level of use of fertilizers or being organic, whatever the type that they use, but it helps to reduce those quantity of fertilizers and contributes to have a more balanced system. So cover crops. Here it's, you usually do that in your farms or no? It's only grass? Usually do. Okay. Also, the use of renewable energy. In Brazil, a lot of producers, they have been installing solar panels to avoid to use the energy from the system that is provided by the city, because in this way, they are using the exposure of the sun to convey in energy, but other farms, as I mentioned, the one that we had in the study, they have biodigesters. Producers are looking for alternatives to have this renewable energy that contributes to reduce the emissions in terms of the energy. Also, recovering degraded areas. I mentioned that we have a program that we recover degraded areas. Here, it's area that we recovered. You see that there are a lot of trees, but before this area was a pasture just like in the sides. And when we have exposed soil, we are not helping at all to have an absorption of these gases, because the soil is very poor. They don't have the structure necessarily to do these removals. So when we have like protected areas or recovered areas, we create these environments that contribute for a better environment, of course, but also to absorb those emissions. So here was pasture, and we had a spring, a water spring right here in the middle that was completely dry. And we are seeing like the challenge with water and with many other things. So after that, we restored this area, we planted this tree, the water started to flow again, and we had like this better environment that brings the biodiversity again. And it's all a combination of factors. It's not only one isolated thing. It's many things that we have in the farm, and they need to work in harmony together to have like these results. And also, the regenerative agriculture, which basically is all of this, cover crops, trees, it's a balanced ecosystem, which here you have a lot. We see that like with the trees and with the system that you have. But having this balanced system, this regenerative system, we are contributing to the decarbonization. And here is a case, as I mentioned, we published an article with a client that we have in Denmark. Denmark, they are pretty advanced with these topics of environment, if I can say like that. And we connected all the dots. We did the measurement from the farm. We did the measurement for the exports. And they did the measurement of the importing, roasting, and selling the coffees. So we connected the whole chain, all the information that we gathered, and we came to the result that the coffee from this farm, Santa Clara, with this roaster in Denmark, Clever Coffee, it was carbon negative. We were removing 0.06 kilograms of CO2 per kilo of roasted coffee. So we brought that because it is one of the outcomes. When we are able to understand the food chain, we have a better understanding that the responsibility is not only ours as producers to do different things, but that the roasters, they have their side as well, to use a better package, to change the fuel combustion that they are using for the roasters. So it brings us a knowledge to understand what we need to change as a chain, not as a single factor in the equation. The responsibility is not only ours as producers, but of the whole chain. So this was a very nice outcome that we had, connecting all the dots. And to conclude, this topic is a little bit confused because we still have many things that we don't understand how it works. Because as I said, each country, there is his own way to do things. But what I want to bring here is that we as producers, we need to have this understanding. And we have to figure out how. Maybe it's an expensive process to do by yourself, but maybe with partners that we have, being government, being on companies that you work with, it is an initial step to have this understanding of what we are doing and how we can improve. Because we have been doing things for years. We have our system here, it's an agroforest, but okay, now everybody's talking about impact, everybody's talking about the climate change, everybody's talking about many things. And for what I'm seeing, the world is considering that the responsibility is from the producer. But no, the responsibility is from all of us. But before we say anything or we act, we need to have this understanding. We need to measure our carbon footprint. We need to have data. We need to have a full visualization as we are as farm and what we can do next. To do not only by ourselves, but to do in partnership with our clients, with our community, with our partners, because I think that that's the only way that we are going to pass through all those situations. Because the weather is changing. I don't know if probably there are people that still believe that is a cycle thing, that is not the climate change, because I heard that a lot. That happens every 50 years. It's normal. It will get back to the normal. It will not. We are seeing that it's changing. Things that we would never imagine that would happen. I don't know if you saw in the news, but in Brazil, we have a state in the very south part of the country. Basically, almost 100% of the state was hit by floods. It was underwater because of heavy rains. And that's one thing that we never imagined that would happen. And why that is happening? Because many factors. But we as producers, we as owners of lands, we can do differently and we can do our part. And I think that once we do it, this measurement, once we have this understanding and we can take actions, we are doing our part to collaborate to a better world, a more sustainable one, but we have the power to choose what we are doing as producers, because the property is yours. You choose what you are doing or not inside your property. And for us in Brazil, you see here, when we see photos of coffee plantations in Brazil, it's those views that go far with a lot of coffee, zero trees, the trees are surrounding, and we need to change. We are seeing that. People here are aiming to have a coffee growing system as Brazil, and we are aiming to have a coffee growing system as you. It's true. But we need to understand how to do it, because the mindset of the producers are oriented to production. And once you change the production, we need to understand how to keep it, how to be sustainable, because it doesn't matter if you change everything and in the end the incomes of the farm are reducing, it will be not sustainable at all, because we need to think in environment, in social, and of course in the finances aspect, the economic aspect. So we as producers in Brazil, we have been thinking about that, how to bring this change of mindset, how to change little by little, because we need trees. We need to improve the way that we grow coffee. Otherwise, as I said in the beginning, in a few years, it will be very difficult. And you will blame Brazil because the prices are getting high. Because the sea market, it's crazy. Because everything that happens with Brazilian production, the fault is from Brazil. But I'm kidding, but just saying that like we are starting to change the mindset because we need to change our reality. So, obrigada, thank you. That was just a little bit about what we have been doing. If you want to know more in the deep way about this study and other things that we have been doing as company, we have our yearly impact report that we bring all those impact initiatives. And we do because we truly believe that we need to do differently and we need to do our best to contribute not only to the farmers, but the community where we are and with our partners worldwide. So, muchas gracias por su tiempo. And yeah, that's it. Thank you. Obrigada.